Vikings Rams Thursday night football. Minnesota after their first loss on a short week. What to watch for? Also tonight, the unveiling of Victor Wembanyama year 2, now with Chris Paul. I want clairvoyance. I want heat. I want to know what the floor is of the ceiling on the roof of the sky-high potential of Victor Wembanyama. Let's go around the horn. Vikings Rams Thursday night football. Minnesota 5-1. How the defense responds after they came back down to earth a bit in the loss to Detroit this weekend. LA coming off a win over Vegas, 2-4. The musts continue for them, and reinforcement is coming. Cooper Kupp's return tonight. Puka Nacua is questionable. Other side Vikings, TJ Hawkins is questionable as well. Kevin Clark, this is football. Around the horn to you. What are you watching for today?
I'm looking for that efficient Vikings defense because, of course, they have the highest pressure rate from blitzes this year. Oh, wait, that's the Los Angeles Rams who actually have that. So let's talk about them. Of course, the Vikings have the most efficient pass rusher in football. Not so fast, my friend. That's Jared Verse of the Rams.
What's happening here? Oh,
is talking
black is
about
white.
this Vikings
Day is
defense,
night.
and the Rams have the ability to get to the quarterback, too. That's the matchup I'm watching. Sam Darnold has been pretty good against the blitz this year. That is going to be the matchup that determines this game. For the Rams, I thought this was a team that could win the Super Bowl. But this is going to be more like the team we thought we saw coming into the season. Cooper Kupp is healthy. Puka Nacua, there's optimism he's going to play. Matthew Stafford has had his worst 6-game stretch to start a season ever. This is going to look like vintage Matthew Stafford.
Wow, you love LA tonight. You love LA over Minnesota. You think LA is what people think Minnesota is, it sounds like. By the way, you were wheeling and dealing there.
Minnesota's very good, but I just think this Rams team's going to get closer to what
David
we thought.
Dennis Jr., around the horn to you.
That answer had more plot twist than a soap opera. I don't even know where we were going with that. I'm gonna go ahead and be very direct here. The Vikings are going to win this game. How about that? No plot twist. That's just the answer that we're going to have here. And a lot of that comes from the fact that Brian Flores seems to have done well against McVay in their matchups dating back to the Super Bowl a few years ago. And the fact that Matthew Stafford has taken about 17 sacks in those first 6 games, and Brian Flores and that Vikings team are going to blitz and pressure a whole lot. And I think they are coming out angry from that loss to the Detroit Lions. They're going to get their season back on track with a win tonight.
Yates, around the horn to you.
Yeah, part of the reason why Stafford's been on his back so much this season, too, is because the Rams' offensive line has been a problem. I'm sure Flores is licking his chops in the film room, ready to get after it. Also, the Vikings lost to the Lions, who people on this program, who may or may not be named Kevin Clark, were telling me were the best offense in the league. It's not like they got blown out by some team that was not good. I don't think that we're going to see some huge drop-off from Minnesota, because it's not like Sam Darnold, once again, turned into a pumpkin last week. They just lost the game. They're still one of the best teams in the NFL. I don't think a Thursday night goofball matchup is suddenly going to change all of that at all. I think the Vikings are maybe
night matchup, which just means a short turnaround. Doesn't need to be goofball, Clinton Yates. Bob Ryan, around the horn to you.
I don't think any less of the Vikings after they lost what I thought was one of the most entertaining games I've seen thus far this season in the NFL to a very good team, losing on a field goal with 15 seconds to go in a game in which their best player, Justin Jefferson, said we really made uncharacteristic mistakes, okay? There's no reason to think less of them. And Brian Flores' defense, I think, will be quite ready for Mr. Goff and Mr. Kupp and everybody else. And I think they're going to reassert themselves as a Super Bowl, highly priced Super Bowl contender tonight.
Kevin Clark, back to you.
Yeah, I think this is a huge game in the context of the Rams franchise, because if they look really good, like the type of team that can save their season, maybe Cooper Kupp is not on the trade block. Maybe they don't start the retool now. Look, they were having a fire sale just a couple of days ago. This is important. If they look okay, maybe the fire sale is off.
And Clinton Yates after the horn.
Right, and that is a huge reason why I think this is an issue. They don't even know what the state of the franchise is in terms of roster, and they can't seem to beat anybody that's not in their division in their own conference. This would be a massive upset, I feel, if the Rams actually pull this off.
Seen massive upsets, though, before Thursday night. Goofball games. I do like that.
Goofball.
I'm a fan of the goof.
Thank you.
Yates, Dennis, Ryan all have Minnesota. Clark has the surprising result here. of the LA Rams winning. We'll be moving on. NBA season opener part 3. Ball night. Spurs,
Ball
Mavs, finally, fashionably late. It's Victor Wembanyama, year 2, now with Chris Paul. What that does for his growth. Again, I say I want to know the future right now. Clairvoyance, a takeover of the league. Is it possible, and what would it take? Around the horn, David Dennis Jr., year 2, Victor Wembanyama.
Victor Wembanyama is one of the few ceilingless athletes that we have seen in our lifetimes. I wouldn't be surprised at any accomplishment this dude has. The last time we saw him on the basketball court, he was the best player for 35 or 40 minutes against Team USA. Let me remind you, that was a pretty great team. This dude has already put up MVP caliber numbers. 20 points, 10.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists on 79% shooting, at least those numbers. The only 2 other guys who have done that at 7 feet tall were Embiid and Jokic on MVP years. We are looking at a leap that is beyond what he did the rookie year, especially with Chris Paul adding a little bit of, taking away from those turnovers and putting the ball in his hand a little bit more. We're talking defensive player of the year, all NBA, and maybe a couple of MVP votes along the way.
There we go. Bob Ryan, I turn to you. You've seen it all. You've seen jumps from year 1 to year 2. You've seen maybe regressions year 1 to year 2. What do you see with Victor Wembanyama?
If someone had told you 25 years ago that baseball would have a guy who could win a Cy Young and a Triple Crown, perhaps in the same year, you would have laughed. Well, he's here, and we all know who it is. If someone told you in basketball 20 years ago, or 10 or 5 or 2, that there would be a 7'4" guy who would be a nightly triple threat for a triple-double, and who was the consensus pick as the defensive player of the year in his second year in the league, you would have said, huh? It must be some guy in France. Well, guess what? He's here. This guy, you cannot overstate how special he is and how incredible his future prospects are. I can't wait to see him play tonight and many other nights.
All right, you can't overstate it.
Period.
Does that mean he is an MVP candidate for you right now? You're expecting an MVP caliber year from him?
Positively, because
You're
he's got
expecting
none of the
playoffs
physical
this year
skill.
for the San Antonio Spurs then, Bob Ryan, because we know that would have to happen as well. He's got it up here, he says. Clinton Yates, you got
in
it
my
up here?
vote.
It's around the horn of you.
He's got it up
If
there.
somebody
And
said
here,
all
he
of
got
those
everywhere.
things, if somebody said all of those things and said it was going to happen in the NBA, you would have said, yeah, he'll probably play for the Spurs. I am over this thing I've had with the Spurs where they're like your classmate down the street who always does their homework, always mows the lawn, and they always get to play, so they get to do all the fun stuff. Wemby's just another example of that, and so therefore I am with Bob. I will be watching this night in and night out because there's one franchise that knows how to do this when a generational player comes along and max them out. There is still kind of an eighth wonder of the world element to just watching him coexist with other players on the court there beyond the skill. He is absolutely the number one story, as far as I'm concerned, in the league at this point, because it's just, you have no idea what you're going to get out of it from a top level standpoint. I cannot wait to watch this, just to see how this young man grows and grows in terms of his game and how he is as a human being too, because he's a pretty cool guy.
I hear it all. I hear we can't even believe to expect to even conceive what the possibilities are. I want all that. Kevin Clark, is he an MVP this year? Is he going to carry San Antonio to the playoffs? A top 4 seed. Let me hear it.
Playoffs, yes. When, not if, when Wemby figures it out and the Spurs team figures it out, we're going to have to start a new league. We're going to have a Champions League for Wemby, and then everybody else gets to play in this different thing here. There's a reason there's 21 national games this year, and before Wemby got there were 4 for the Spurs. That's kind of all you need to know. The league knows where this is heading, but the biggest thing to me is Chris Paul and the credibility in that offense. People say, okay, Chris Paul is not what he once was. Well, he's better than Trey Jones. He doesn't have to be Chris Paul from 10 years ago. He has to be better than Trey Jones. So that's what I'm watching. There's going to be instant credibility in that offense. Wemby's going to know what to do. There's going to be a leap. The 1 year to year 2 leap is always the biggest thing in sports. I expect it this year. MVP candidacy and the playoffs.
Side of the court, of course, the Mavericks, who are trying to get back to the finals and go further in their big acquisition this offseason. Klay Thompson. Mavs debut tonight, David. What are you expecting? And let me throw an over-under out there. He averaged 17 last year. Over-under 17 for Thompson tonight.
I'm going to go under because I think it's going to take a little bit of time for that team to sort of coalesce around what they have, figuring out with Luka and Kyrie and Klay and that lineup, especially on the defensive end, but also just moving the ball around and getting them open. I think that we will have some explosive Klay games this season where he goes off for 8-9 threes. I don't think it's going to be tonight. It'll be a little bit less than that 17 points.
And Yates?
I'm rooting for Klay. I like Klay. I don't think that the Klay we know of Splash Brothers fame is going to be the same guy, and I don't think he needs to be. But the Mavericks do have to figure this out. Remember, 2 years ago, they missed the playoffs, and last year, even though they went to the finals around like March, they were outside of the play-in. So there are still things that are going to matter with this team, and I think Klay is going to be partially what gets them there, but not the whole thing. It's just not the same.
Well, in terms of 17, I'll go under. He'll be averaging 13 to 15 maybe. And his role is specific as long as he understands it, and you know he will, that he's not the man. He is clearly number 3, clearly. And that's the job description that he needs to fulfill, and that is exactly the kind of guy that they needed. And it depends on how much he's got left in the tank, but I think it's enough.
And Kevin Clark after the horn. Get us home.
I'm going over. There's only 3 guys in the NBA who've made more three-point field goals in the last 3 years than Luka Doncic, and Klay Thompson is one of them. I'm going over. The contract is manageable. He's going to be a contributor.
Buy or sell next. Bucks 124, Sixers 109. Antetokounmpo and Lillard dominance. Philly shorthanded, as you know. Today, the NBA officially opening up the investigation into Joel Embiid's status, as you know, and the player participation policy, as you know. This is one way to start a season. Clinton Yates, is it an Embiid problem, a Sixers problem, or an NBA problem?
It's an NBA problem because the grandstanding quotient here is very high. The definition of news is things that are new. Nothing is new here. Embiid is injured. Load management is a problem. The NBA doesn't know how to handle it. What exactly is the purpose of an investigation if you don't tell us the actual information as to why? It feels like you're just making up bluster to try to embarrass one franchise. I get why they're doing it, but nothing's changed here. I'm not sure why we need such a big...
David Dennis Jr.
Well, I think the reason the NBA is coming at Philadelphia so much right now is less about the opening of the season, more about Philadelphia preemptively saying that Embiid is not going to be playing back-to-backs without even knowing his actual health going forward. But overall, if we're trying to do something that is for the fans, right, and you want to talk about what the fans want, ask anybody in Philadelphia. What they want is a healthy Embiid in April, and they don't care as much about if Embiid is going to be healthy for a back-to-back against Charlotte in January. So if this is about fan service, this is about making sure that the best player in that city can bring a championship to that city, and the best way to do that is have him healthy in the playoffs.
Philadelphia, David Dennis, wants a head coach to be able to pick up the blitz. If you ask any fan, that's what they'd say first of all. But second of all, I think that you just look at how performative this is, and it tracks. And the announcement earlier today that, the investigation has started. What does that mean? Does that mean that, like, investigators landed at the airport and they're getting a police escort down to the Wells Fargo Center to figure this all out? Like, it is just so funny and performative. What they're trying to do is publicly embarrass a player, and he will not be the last one for it, into playing. That's what this is. It's just kind of making a statement, getting the reporters to all tweet this out and say, hey, this is what we're looking into. The only idea I have to fix this, a reality show. I want to see these investigators. Trench.
Okay, enough of that. Bob Ryan, I turn to you. You've seen it all, of course.
Top notch.
You would recognize the NBA has a load management problem. How do you see this particular instance on opening night?
You'd think they just learned about Joel Embiid yesterday, that they didn't know that here's a guy that started his NBA career by not playing for 2 years, who's always hurt, who's very lucky if he can play 55 games in any given year. And if the Sixers say he's hurt, he's hurt. That's all. I don't have any problem with that at all, none whatsoever. It just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't fit any description that makes any sense to me at all. Why they're wasting their time making a big fuss out of this? You think the Sixers wouldn't want him to play? They were 31-7 with them last year, and 15-27 without him. They want him to play if he can.
Then we'll move on. Suns 116, Clippers 113 last night in overtime. Phoenix christened LA's new Intuit Dome home with the road win. First look we got at the Wall, the famed section the Clippers vet for especially crazed fans. Seat them in 51 uninterrupted rows. Pardon the uninterruption. And then Booker and Durant befuddled by it. KD missed 2 free throws. They went wild. Game ends when Harden misses a free throw on a wall-less side of the court at the end of the first overtime. Clinton, buy or sell the Wall?
I'll buy it. As the only panelist here that's been to the Intuit Dome, albeit not for a basketball game, shouts to Bruno Mars and the Hooligans, this is clearly effective if the opponents of the Clippers are discussing it post-game. The lone goal of this is to provide yourself with some sort of home court advantage. If the people on the court are talking about it, you win.
Did that
Good job,
surprise
Eddie
you
Ball.
that
got himself loose.
KD said it affected his shots? I would have figured these guys have seen it all by now.
KD's got the biggest rabbit ears in the league. If anybody's going to be affected by
Dennis
anything,
Jr.
it's the guy with the
Buy
burner
or
account.
sell the wall.
I'm sort of selling the idea of the wall, partially because there's not going to be a lot of high pressure free throws for a lot of teams in that arena because the Clippers are not going to be that good. What's most important to me, the takeaway here, is the Phoenix Suns and what they were able and were not able to do. They brought in point guards who were supposed to lower the turnovers, and they still got 13 turnovers out of their big three. On the bright side, they turned a bad fourth quarter, which is historically bad fourth quarter last year, into a team that was able to get rid of a 9-point deficit, 10-point deficit down the stretch. KD scored 12 points in the fourth quarter, and they were able to show up in the fourth and overtime, which I think is the actual sustainable thing that's going to mean something in the
Looking
season.
forward to the 30 for 30 on the Suns' opening season win. On the wall, Kevin Clark, buy or sell?
Yeah.
I love the wall, and it should be a model for every new arena and stadium going forward, which is they ask themselves one question: is it cool to watch a game here? And I think so many of these new places are all about amenities and bilking fans, and there's some of that. I saw $70 parking there, but this is not just about treating fans like a piggy bank. It's about building an atmosphere that people wanted to join in. By the way, KD only played 1 year of college. Maybe he just can't handle student section atmospheres.
Bob Ryan, on the wall.
Anything that can replicate a high school or collegiate atmosphere is good for the NBA. That's what this does. So, and that score, I have absolutely no problem. I love it. I welcome it. Good idea, Mr. Balmer. I like it. As far as the game's concerned, the Clippers are irrelevant now. You know, their window's slammed shut a long time ago. The Suns are what I call an annoying team. They're going to be annoyingly good. They're going to win, I don't know.
Okay.
Whatever. And that's all they're going to be. And then I'm sorry.
Other than
So,
that,
you know,
how did you
sorry,
enjoy the
folks.
game, Mr. Ryan? Then we'll move on. Buy or sell 3. The Giants saying they are sticking with Brian Daboll, head coach, and GM Joe Shane this year and next year. Announcing this midweek 8 at 2-5. Kevin Clark, buy or sell?
Let's just keep the Bob Ryan train going. The Giants are irrelevant. Their window closed years ago. This is a bad franchise who doesn't know how to hire, and the problem is they're seeking stability for the sake of stability. Joe Shane, in particular, is not the answer. That's a bad roster. I'd move off him. By the way, John Mara said we're retaining our guys twice now before firing them a month later. That's all you need to know about this.
Okay. Bob Ryan.
We all know, the 4 of us, the 5 of us all know that votes of confidence are standing jokes in all sports. So don't worry about that. My solution to them is bring back George Young and Bill Parcells, but I doubt that that's possible. So they're not going anywhere. No, but it's not fair to Dable either. Yeah.
Glenn Yates.
I'll buy it. The beatings will continue until morale improves. They've made a decision. They want to stick with it. If you don't think that you have somebody better to go to immediately, I'm not saying that's not the case, but if they don't think so, I don't see the reason in mixing it up midseason just because you want to. A vote of confidence is pretty paper thin, but it is something to say, and they said
David Dennis Jr.
I'm buying that they should keep Daboll at least through the end of the season and maybe into next season. He deserves to be able to try to coach a serviceable quarterback, which he does not have right now in Daniel Jones.
Yates, Bob Ryan. Vote of confidence, but also an elimination. David Dennis Jr., Kevin Clark. Showdown next. Bryce Young's return to QB1 for the Carolina Panthers coming this week versus the Broncos after a family car crash for Andy Dalton. Terrible to hear. The stud quote here that he handled his benching like a stud was interesting to hear. Kevin Clark, Studley return. Chances the benching will lead to a better Bryce Young.
To quote the brilliant film Oppenheimer, the chances are near zero. All of the things, the advantages that Bryce Young has this year instead of last year, a better line, better weapons, all of those things he already had in September, and he was still really bad. This one's over.
David Dennis Jr.
I think he will be a little bit better because we've seen what the floor is, and the floor actually is a little bit more Andy Dalton than it is Bryce Young. So I think we will see some improvement this weekend.
Kevin Clark gets the point. We'll move on. Ticker tape parade for the New York Liberty. spent a lot of time into the victory because it ended on a very controversial call and Coach Cheryl Reeve of Minnesota and everything she said. But here's a moment to talk about the Liberty. Here's a question for you, David Dennis Jr. Chances the Liberty repeat? What are the odds?
I think the odds of them repeating are the same odds they had to win Game 5, which is 50-50, because as good as this team looks, Napheesa Collier and that Lynx team are on their way again, and they are
50-50,
angry.
that's a
I think we're
push.
gonna have a
All
final
right,
matchup,
there we go.
and
Kevin
we're going to
Clark?
be right there with them again.
There's more teams that can win next year. 50 is way too high. I'm going about 33. The Aces are going nowhere. We'll see with some of these teams. Half the league has either had a coaching or GM change. There's going to be a lot of retooling. I'm going.
And an expansion draft, too, which means you're losing players. And the impending CBA agreement at free agency is going to be up in the air. Points and game and FaceTime.
I had Kyler Murray on my show, This Is Football, was on ESPN2 the other day, and we talked about the Call of Duty trolls, the guys that follow him around and say you're playing too many video games. He said to me he doesn't understand why everybody does it. He says that because everybody in the NFL plays video games. It's the brotherhood. They all talk. So no more video game shaming. We all do it. I'm playing NCAA all weekend. Cam Ward's only a 93 on the new roster update. I hate it.
We'll see you tomorrow around the horn.
Spontaneous.